Good morning. Can y'all hear me okay? Yes?
Yeah.
Everybody was waiting for somebody else to nod. Good morning. I'm Greg Casar. I represent the heart of Texas and the United States Congress, and I'm proud to chair the Congressional Progressive Caucus. I'd like to start today by looking backwards, not at the beginning of this war, but at the beginning of this administration. The day that Donald Trump took office, he created the Department of Government Efficiency to, quote, cut wasteful expenditures. Trump, Musk, and Republicans in Congress told us we were too short on money, so we had to make cuts. And cut they did. They cut funding for cancer research. They cut funding for kids' cancer research. They cut funding for nuclear safety workers and aviation workers. They fired people who care for our veterans and clean up after disasters. They cut funding for citizens' health care. And now, after cutting and cutting and cutting, the Trump administration wants $200 billion for their war of choice. Today, the Progressive Caucus says, enough. We are announcing an official position against Trump's disastrous $200 billion request of funding for this illegal war. Not one more cent for this reckless, illegal war that is making no one more safe and no one more free. Let's put Trump's $200 billion war request into perspective. For $200 billion, we could send $600 to every man, woman, and child in America. Remember the ACA tax credits that used to help 20 million Americans afford their health insurance? $200 billion could cover those again and again and again and again, 6 times over. It could provide free lunch to every kid in America with $170 billion left over. It could cover childcare for 14 million American children. Donald Trump says $200 billion is a small price to pay for the war. But that's pretty easy for him to say because he never pays it. It's not his health care getting cut. It's not his kids going hungry. It's not his budget getting stretched thin. And what are we getting for the money? What's the actual price that we're paying? 13 American service members already tragically killed. Thousands of civilians dead, millions displaced. Gas prices up, food prices will follow, maybe leading us into recession. Every day it gets worse. Yesterday we learned that Donald Trump is deploying 3,000 more brave American men and women to the Middle East. That's thousands more parents lying awake at night wondering if it's going to be their kid that goes next. We must end this war now. Democrats must unite against this outrageous request. We should join together to block the request and stop the war as best we can, or at least force Republicans to answer to the American people who overwhelmingly oppose this war. And I'm proud that, as it so often does, the Congressional Progressive Caucus is first in leading the way. I'm now proud to call up our Chair Emerita, my friend Pramila Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Chairman Casar, and I'm so proud to be here with the Progressive Caucus as we take these bold and necessary positions. We are all here today because we are furious about Trump's illegal war in Iran. Yesterday, it was reported that Trump will send 3,000 more soldiers to the Middle East. Today, he announced that he's sending 1,000 paratroopers there, and it certainly appears that he is gearing up to have American boots on the ground for a senseless and dangerous war that Congress never authorized, that the American people do not want, and that will waste hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money and skyrocket costs for Americans right here at home, all the while killing innocent civilians in Iran, in Lebanon, and displacing millions of people across the Middle East. This is not an excursion. It's not a little journey. This is a war that completely undermines America's stability and ability to lead the world towards peace. We have already spent $30 billion on this war. That's enough to end homelessness in America, or to provide free school lunches to all American children. And Trump is asking for another $200 billion. And as the chairman said, there are so many things that can go towards, including, by the way, we could cancel all medical debt for 100 million Americans in the United States with that $200 billion. We could provide free school lunches for all kids in America for almost 2 decades. And we could fund nutrition assistance for 42 million Americans. There are real needs right here at home. But Trump is recklessly taking us to war, risking the lives of our troops, choking off the world's energy supply, and killing civilians in poorly planned, untargeted attacks. We've seen over and over again from our past history around the world that forever wars and ill-fated regime change efforts do not work, and that bombs are simply not the answer. And the CPC has been at the forefront of that debate over and over and over again. Our work internationally needs to be for diplomacy, and our work here in Congress needs to be to rein in an out-of-control president before more lives are lost. Our founders knew that going to war was a very serious decision, and they knew that it was a decision that had to be debated by the elected representatives of the people here in Congress. They were breaking from the monarchy, from the idea that kings and one person alone would say that a war was good for the people and lie about it, and then plunge the entire country into disaster. That's why we have to refuse this budget request, and we have to vote on another war powers resolution that stops this illegal war immediately. And now it's my honor to hand it over to another colleague of mine on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative Sidney Kamlager-Dove from California.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sidney Kamlager-Dove. I'm the Congresswoman for the 37th Congressional District, and as was stated, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So today we are here to talk about money, specifically $200 billion in taxpayer dollars that Donald Trump is requesting for his illegal war on Iran. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, sorry, yo, I'm wearing all kind of hats today, but the CPC is a hard no, and I am here to tell you why. Because this supplemental request is straight BS. The war is already costing over $1 billion per day, has taken the lives of American service members, and is pushing us towards the brink of a global recession and deeper isolationism. The average American already has personally paid $152 toward Trump's war of choice. That is a utility bill, that is school supplies, that is a grocery bill. And now Trump is asking Congress, which never authorized this war in the first place, this dumpster fire, to fund it with no end game in sight. So let me tell you something. As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, there were no full committee hearings on this war before it happened. And subsequently, there have been no full committees on this war, with no plan, with no strategy, with no discussion about imminent or continued threats, nothing. So why not tell the American people how you are spending their money and risking their children's lives? Why not put the evidence on display so people know exactly why we are risking our safety and our money and our children for a war of Donald Trump's choice? Because there are too many questions and we have gotten no answers. But what we do know is, just last week, Tulsi Gabbard reappeared in front of the Intelligence Committee, and she long assessed that Iran would use the Strait of Hormuz as leverage. And now we are seeing gas prices in my home state teetering over $6 a gallon. The same Iranian drones that we have watched Russia use for years against Ukraine are evading U.S. air defenses and killing service members. And Trump previously was warned by the intelligence community that a large-scale military assault on Iran would be unlikely to topple the government. Now they assess that the regime is actually more entrenched and more hardline. So the reality is Trump chose to barrel towards a war with Iran from the moment he ripped up Obama's nuclear deal in 2018. Trump is messy. This president is messy. And now he is messing with Americans' lives, our money, and our safety. You've already heard from members of what this money could be used for. I'm going to give you some more. You could cover nearly 3 million people on Medicaid for a full year. You could feed over 3 million families through SNAP for a full year. You could build 91,000 affordable housing units in a year. U.S. taxpayers should not be forced to foot the bill for Trump's failed foreign policy when there is so much urgent investment needed right here at home. So sorry, not sorry, DJT. You break it, you buy it. And you can take it out of your crypto money and not from the American taxpayers. My progressive colleagues and I are standing firm against funding Trump's avoidable, costly, illegal, ill-conceived war. And now I want to turn it over to my sister from California, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs.
Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. So, as the representative of San Diego, the country's biggest military community, I have deep respect for everyone who wears our country's uniform, and I feel a profound sense of responsibility to them. It's been my generation and my community that have risked their lives and sacrificed more than most when presidents conduct regime change operations or military adventurism in the Middle East. Just last week, 3 San Diego warships carrying 2,500 San Diego-based Marines deployed en route to the Middle East. So it's not our president's lives or Congress's lives who are on the line. It's my friends, my peers, my neighbors, my community, my constituents. So let me be very clear about something, because we know that the war hawks are going to try and say the opposite. Voting against this supplemental and this war is actually a vote for our troops, who deserve a Congress that will ask the hard questions and reject rubber-stamping wars that lack a clear strategy, endgame, or basic oversight. The $200 billion defense supplemental package isn't just a few extra zeros on the budget for the Pentagon. This is not a small price to pay, as Donald Trump says, because that price is our service members' lives, civilian lives, and the future and possibilities that we're stealing from my generation and the ones that come after. You've already heard all the things $200 billion could fund. It could fund twice the cost of high-quality universal pre-K for every 3- and 4-year-old in this country. It could build affordable housing units. It could pay over 27 million families on SNAP. And let's be honest about what this $200 billion actually buys when it comes to this war. At the rate that this war is burning through money, nearly $2 billion a day, that supplemental funds roughly 100 more days of combat. That's not a one-time cost to wrap things up. That's a down payment on a long war. And the Pentagon hasn't even passed an audit to account for the $1 trillion Congress already gives them every year. I'm glad that CPC is taking this strong position against this defense supplemental, but this shouldn't only be a progressive position. If my colleagues consider themselves pro-military, they should vote no. If my colleagues consider themselves constitutionalists, they should vote no. If my colleagues consider themselves deficit hawks or fiscally responsible, they should vote no. And if my colleagues care about their fellow Americans and our future, they should vote no. So while I hope that these ongoing talks are successful in ending this war, Donald Trump has opened Pandora's box by starting this reckless and illegal war, and it's still unclear whether Iran will become a failed state, devolve into a civil war, get a harder line leader. Congress should not excuse that behavior and send a signal to any president that they can do whatever they want, and Congress will forgive and forget and fund their military adventurism. It's our job to represent and fight for the American people. It's our responsibility to be their voice. And the American people do not want this war, especially when it costs $200 billion and they're struggling to afford groceries, gas, and health care as it is. Congress shouldn't worsen our cost of living crisis by approving this $200 billion package. So I hope all of my colleagues will join us in voting no. And I will turn it over to my friend and colleague on the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Chris DeLuzio.
Thank you, Rep. Jacobs. I'm proud to join my caucus colleagues here today. As you heard from Rep. Jacobs, I'm a member of the Armed Services Committee. I'm also a veteran. I served in the Middle East. I served on the ground in Iraq, a war that my generation of veterans will pay the cost of for as long as our generation lives. And to see so many of the same mistakes being made again, to squander and frankly put in harm's way Americans who don't need to be in harm's way, it's something that we have to fight back, to push back against, to end. And I see this administration doing it. They skipped Congress because they knew their Republican counterparts would let them. They knew the American people wouldn't want this war, which is why you see the polling day after day showing more opposition to this war. A war that's already cost 13 American lives, hundreds wounded, a region destabilized, an economic price we're all paying here at home, global energy markets in shock. And to think this administration didn't understand that the Strait of Hormuz might be shut down by the Iranians, something that we knew 20 years ago from our military experience in this region. And the cost we've all heard about today of what this administration is asking the Congress for, $200 billion. $200 billion is a lot of money. They've already spent more than $20 billion by most accounts. And that $200 billion could do a lot in our districts and a lot for the American people. We saw this administration take health care away from people. $200 billion could extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for more than 5 years that they let expire. The Republicans talked about their need to count pennies and dollars. They could have extended it for more than 5 years. $200 billion could pay for a community college, 2-year community college for 23 million Americans. We could have high-speed rail in this country. We could pass the American High-Speed Rail Act, just about $200 billion. That's the cost. We could have free school lunch for basically every kid in America for years. We could have the cost of childcare covered for every kid under 5 years old in this country. That's what $200 billion could spend. These are the choices. And this administration, what's their answer? Tax cuts for billionaires, make you sicker and hungrier, and you're going to foot the bill for a war while jacking up our debt along the way. So I think this is a clear and easy case for the Congress to say no. No to continuing to fund for a long time a war that we haven't authorized, that the American people don't want. And I think about, I've got friends who are still in uniform. I think about the Americans who are over there to fight or might be sent to fight, and they will do their duty. They will serve and fight courageously if we send them. But we have a responsibility to never squander that patriotism, to never squander their willingness to serve, to ask hard questions. And those kinds of questions demand an answer, I think, right now of saying no. So I'm honored to introduce a fellow Pennsylvanian, member of the House Appropriations Committee, Madeleine Dean.
Good morning. And I'm delighted to stand here with my friends, colleagues on the Progressive Caucus. But I stand here not just as a member of the Progressive Caucus. I stand here as a member of our entire caucus, the Democratic Caucus. I stand here as a citizen who believes that this supplemental request is incoherent, irresponsible, and just plain wrong. Let's remember where we are. The president is tasked with two things. Number one, to keep America safe. Number two, to make life more affordable for everyone. He's failing on both fronts miserably. We are less safe as a result of this adventure, this excursion, as he calls it, in the Middle East. Everything is going up in price. We were already in trouble as a result of his brutal immigration policies and his incoherent tariff policies. Now layer in that what has happened to the price of oil, what has happened to the price of gasoline at the pump, now over $4 in my district, and the price of diesel even higher, making costs for everything we buy more. So he has failed miserably. But I'd also like you to picture what he has done around the globe. And what I see is rubble. Rubble in location after location. You can be looking at the White House itself. You can be looking in the Middle East. Rubble is what this president's legacy will be. And sadly, who's in the rubble? American military members. Children are in the rubble. I have the privilege of serving on both Foreign Affairs and the Appropriations Committee. And when I go around the world, as I've had the luck, the good fortune of doing, and talking to leaders around the world, our allies, our friends, NATO members, they look at us and they are confused. What is your president doing? And you're really losing what they say to us in meetings, private and not so private.
You are losing the respect of your allies and friends, which is extraordinarily dangerous. Madeleine Albright called us the indispensable nation. Yet I have heard from members in Europe, for example, they know they need to be prepared to go it alone without this indispensable nation because of the unreliability of this president. So he took us to a war of choice. He's made us less safe. He never went to Congress. We can take that personally because it is our congressional responsibility. The framers put it that way. I think what's even worse is he never even went to the American people to make this case. This isn't about process so much as you didn't even ask the American people if this sacrifice, financial and human sacrifice, was going to be worth it. Our founders were smart. They thought this thing through. They knew a monarch, a king, one person, should not have the power to declare war and put American lives at risk. So what I want to do, and so I'm a clear no for this bill that was put before us without even asking for authorization for force. What I want to do here, if you don't mind, and I know Secretary Christy Hegseth, as I like to call him, doesn't like the front page talking about the cost of war. But I'm going to read the names of the service members, 13 now, who are dead, because we must not forget their sacrifice. Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant Declan Cody, Major Jeffrey O'Brien, Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzan, Major John Kilner, Captain Ariana Savino, Tech Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, Captain Seth Koval, Captain Curtis Angst, Tech Sergeant Tyler Simmons, and Staff Sergeant Benjamin Peddington. To the press, I ask you never to forget these names. Call out their names, their sacrifice, their extraordinary service. Call out this administration as it uses crazy Orwellian dangerous language like war is peace, and I'm just on an excursion. This is no excursion. This is war. It's deadly. It's chaotic. It's messy, and it's wrong.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for that very important reminder. And when Donald Trump says that it's a small price to pay, the lives of those service members is not a small price to pay. And thank you to all of my colleagues for your excellent remarks. We're here to take questions from the press. I think the first one is from Kevin at MS Now, if you're here.
Ken's not here, so I have a
Okay, great.
on the topic of funding generally, do you have faith in Schumer during the shutdown fight to hold the line with the
It is critically important for Democrats and all Democrats in the House and Senate to hold the line on ICE reforms. Some of the ideas that I heard floated yesterday involved still providing funding to some of the very same agencies that killed Alex Preddy. So I think the Congressional Progressive Caucus's position is that leadership in the House and the Senate and rank and file Democrats in the House and the Senate need to stick to our position, which is the American people's position, that we're not going to give ICE and CBP billions more dollars until there are dramatic reforms so that we can prevent the killing of more citizens like Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Go ahead, Max.
On the War Powers Resolution.
And sorry, just so we can get into it, if you could, I know who you are, but if you can mention your name and outlet, it's just part of what we do here.
The War Powers Resolution, a number of your Democratic colleagues voted with Republicans on that a couple weeks ago. What is your message to those Democrats in your caucus who aren't with you on that, and you hope they will join the rest of the caucus in voting no?
I hope we can have a unanimous Democratic no on the next War Powers Resolution.
Caroline Tucker with NBC. Some Republicans have raised using reconciliation to pass supplemental funding. Do you have concerns about that by taking a stand on this?
The big ugly bill could be coming back, and it could be even uglier. And I think this is less of a question for us than it is for vulnerable House Republicans. Does Mike Lawler really want to vote for $200 billion for an illegal war instead of restoring health care for his constituents? Does Republican Congressman Gabe Evans really want to vote for billions of dollars of war when his constituents are losing their food assistance? Does Republican Congressman David Valadao really want to vote to fund a war and ICE without basic reforms like taking off masks from ICE in his district? These vulnerable House Republicans, I'm not sure, are ready to vote to make, to essentially seal the end of their political careers. And others can step in and answer questions if you'd like.
So in the One Big Ugly Bill, they already passed supplemental funding for the Defense Department, about $150 billion in addition to the regularly appropriated funds, making the defense budget $1 trillion this year. As part of that supplemental funding, around $45 billion were for munitions, which is what they say they need this $200 billion for. Almost none of that money has actually been obligated yet. So in addition to just all of the things that this money, this $200 billion could be spent for instead, I think there are still a lot of questions on what they actually intend to use it for when there is already funding for munitions replacement that they have not obligated.
Question on military funding. I mean, I know this is, you guys are talking about this $200 billion number, but say, the Trump administration comes up with a smaller package that is just to fund troops that are in the field. Is something like that acceptable to the Progressive Caucus?
No, I think you've heard, Nick, that of course we'll look at whatever comes and we'll evaluate it. But what you've heard from Sarah, from others, is they already have lots of money and they haven't made a case for the war. So those two things together, I think, are very, very important. Just because they come with a smaller request doesn't mean that we forget about the fact that this is still a war of choice, that there are American troops that have been killed and more that will be put at risk, that there are civilians in Iran, in Lebanon, across the Middle East that are being killed right now. And so I think that we have to go back to, why are we at war? Why have we taken this step when the American people don't want it, when they are really struggling on the ground with losing their health care because Republicans ripped it away? And so I think that it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't matter fully what the request is, though it is significant that the amount that they asked for is $200 billion. That is a significant number, but I think the core element of why are we going to war without authorization, without a case being made to the American people for a war that is making us less safe and driving up costs for the American people, that still stands.
I think it's also, the American people want to know what this president is doing with their money. So they're asking for $200 billion. They've not made a case for the money at all. And then subsequently you get articles coming out showing that the Department of Defense's, the secretary is spending exorbitant amounts of money living high on the hog. Money that could be used to fund child care, health care, to help people get housing. So why are we going to give you more money? And lo and behold, you might use it to eat more lobsters while you're putting our service members at risk, and you're not even coming to us with a concrete plan, a strategy for ending and getting out of this war, and allowing us to have serious continued audits on how you're using the money that you've already been allocated. It makes zero sense, and it doesn't matter the number. This is a value proposition that we're talking about and going around the powers of Congress and the voices and concerns of the American people.
We have time for one more. Go ahead.
Evan Carr, NBC. I wonder if you could comment on the Trump administration lifting some oil sanctions on Iran.
Well, I think this goes to the point that this is a completely senseless war with no plan. We have lifted sanctions on Russia. We have now lifted sanctions on Iran. And those things do not comport with the rest of the arguments about how we have to wage this war on Iran. So I think there are many points of complete hypocrisy and senselessness, and that is one of them. And we in the Foreign Affairs Committee have been continuing to, we have some briefings, not about the war, but we have people before us who come to testify who can't answer a single question about strategy, including that one.
thank you all very much. We really appreciate you covering this press conference and this topic of utmost importance. Y'all have a great day.